Harvard Business School estimates that between 60 and 90% of strategic plans fail to be successfully implemented. That means altogether, or at best, they don't achieve everything that they set out to achieve. We're going to explore how change management and continuous learning and continuous improvement are absolutely essential for organizations, especially within the context and of implementing strategic initiatives. I'm going to help you identify the causes of failure so that you can take the appropriate actions and not repeat these mistakes. You are going to be asked by your leadership to recommend appropriate techniques and methods to increase value and, of course, to mitigate risks during the planning and execution. Remember that, as with everything in business, you will be expected to defend your position, defend it with facts, empirical evidence, and always be prepared to cite your sources and justify your recommendations. If you're saying we need to do X, you have to know the why. Why are you recommending this? So here are some things that I'm going to help you get to that you're going to need to know and that you're going to mitigate. The core and most common reasons that plans fail. First and foremost, without a doubt, poor communication or simply a lack of communication. This is communication to stakeholders and to the people that are actually implementing the changes. This creates, number two, a lack of support or buy-in, along with a lack of alignment. The why, the reason behind it was not communicated, and people don't understand, or they might not care because they don't see the value. This really shows up when leaders in the organization have to prioritize work, prioritize effort, and time. Remember that people will always do what they are rewarded for. So if the reward system hasn't been updated to make this a priority, it won't get prioritized and the work won't get done. And that's kind of what we mean by alignment. All of the prioritization, all of the work has to be aligned to this new strategic plan, which again ties into the third item in a similar way that one translated into two: resources. People aren't given the time, training, tools, whatever that might be, so that they may effectively execute the plan to create the desired results. And we see this because we, again, lack alignment, and maybe that's lacking budget or the prioritization. All of these things combine, and I will say they're going to be all driven by culture. So what do I mean by that? Culture, simply as I can, is the average of behaviors of all of the people within the organization. That is true for a company, nonprofit, school, sports team. Your culture is basically what everyone is doing on average. You might have some really bad behaviors sometimes or some really good ones sometimes, but as within like standard deviation, we're going to call those outliers. It really matters what everyone is doing on average. The behaviors that are driven by, behaviors are driven by what is celebrated and rewarded. This could be things like learning, sharing, helping, or you might get rigid planning or gatekeeping or siloed information and an unwillingness to share or to help. And it all comes down to what are leaders celebrating and rewarding. That's really going to drive a lot of those behaviors. So as a business professional or leader, here's what you need to know and be able to do. You have to intentionally and expertly approach new initiatives in strategic planning and execution. First and foremost, identify and mitigate risks. You have to know what's coming and be able to plan for it so that you can hopefully mitigate it and do something about it. You also need to be able to define quality or the minimum standard and how you're going to achieve that minimum standard, which ties into building plans that align to the business. Effectively communicate and, of course, obtain buy-in. We talked about that. You need to be able to analyze and forecast the impact of a change, either in scope, whether this is budget, if you need to do something more. The changes can be pretty much infinite. But if there is a change in what we need to do, how is that going to impact your budget, costs, your timelines? Remember, nothing goes to plan. Plan on plans changing, but you need to know how to course correct and how to pivot. So build that into your plan. A bonus that's related to this would be implementing the MVP approach, which is the minimum viable product. This improves your time to market and increases value creation. You should be able to accurately forecast the impact to the organization, the time, the value, and really important, how long until you achieve an ROI or a return on your initial investment. I need to start seeing those tangible benefits over and above the investment. And having that MVP, which is the minimum viable product, helps improve the investment horizon, or it shortens the time to value. I want to go back to risks. What are the risks? Remember, a risk is something that might happen. And I often see people screw this up where they're listing out issues when they're talking about risks. An issue might be a current issue or it might be an upcoming challenge, but it's certain. You know it. There's not a risk of it maybe happening. And if it is certain, then it isn't a risk. Part of risks is calculating the probability of it occurring and the impact if it does occur. When it comes to risk management, I like to use the acronym ROAM for this. And I use this to help teams talk about and communicate their risk mitigation plans and what they're doing. Okay, so it stands for R, resolved. This is your objective, meaning that it's no longer a risk because I have resolved it. It was a risk, but I took certain steps and now it's not. O is to own it, which is to actively manage it. I can't exactly resolve it now, but I'm working towards it, so I'm owning that risk. Then there's A, which I don't love because it simply means that we are going to accept the risk, meaning we aren't going to or can't do anything about it, but it's not going to stop us. We're just going to accept that it's a risk and keep moving ahead. Or we're going to mitigate the risk, which is similar to owning it, but I really want to either reduce the probability or reduce the impact, preferably both. But if it's mitigated, which is typically how we hear this, is that if I'm owning it, I'm currently working on it, or it's mitigated, as in I owned it, I mitigated it, and I've done what I can do to an appropriate level. Another important part of leading changes and initiatives is defining roles and responsibilities in relation to the scope of work. And this is a big part of that communication piece, is getting buy-in and getting alignment. For this, I like to use the acronym RACI, R-A-C-I. Who is responsible? Now, this person being responsible may not be doing the actual work. They're likely the leader and they're responsible for it, but not accountable, which means that they're actually doing the work. C is consulted, meaning I need to go to this person for guidance. I'm going to consult them or go to them, and they're going to give me feedback. And then the I is I'm communicating to them. I'm simply keeping them informed. They're being kept in the loop. Kind of that lingo from business jargon. Remember that you can have all of these things, but you are responsible for communicating. You have to do it in a way that creates clarity, creates alignment, and ultimately what we really want is support and buy-in. If you want your strategic initiative to succeed and you want your plans to create the desired results, you have to do these things. I know I've made this sound simple and it sounds easy. And of course, when you get into it, it probably won't feel simple and it won't feel easy. But remember, you don't have to do it alone. Servito is here to help. So please reach out for a consultation or a coaching call.